Success is always moving, and success is obedience. Definition of success, thinking that once I achieved it, then I would be powerful. When our ideas have to exist in the larger context of the world, we figure out how much we don't know. Ignorance is not disqualification, it's just an opportunity for you to learn. A lot of times fear just becomes normalized. I lived according to the truth of my values, because if we learn each step of the way, then the goal is not sustainability, it's just another lesson. Success is how many lessons we can pile onto this journey that make us better for the next step. Pursuing success without a love of self will always be very dangerous. Before you attempt to scale yourself, that you've got to find a way to really love yourself.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. Very exciting news. HubSpot's inbound conference is back, which means you got to clear your schedules, mark your calendars, get the sitter. 3 jam-packed days from September 18th through the 20th, live in Boston. You're going to hear inspirational narratives, candid interviews on the highs and lows of incredibly notable figures, business owners, politicians. You're going to learn from successful entrepreneurs like Ryan Reynolds and Serena Williams on how they've reinvented themselves and their businesses to achieve massive success. They're going to gain valuable insights from industry leaders, visionaries on effective strategies for personal and professional growth, and there's so much more. And on top of all that, I'm speaking again. This is my 3rd inbound, so I'll be doing a segment. So if you want to hear from Ryan Reynolds, Serena Williams, or you want to hear from me, go to inbound.com, go see the lineup, and grab your tickets today. I'll see you in Boston. Sarah, I'm super excited for this. It's going to be a lot of fun. There are 2 ideas that you talk about. We're going to jump right into it. And I love these 2 ideas, and I want to get a little bit more context about what these ideas are. So there's 2 ideas: incubating hope and that success is obedience. And I love these. So can you go just a little bit deeper? And then we're going to talk about everything about owning your power, about sort of the journey that you've gone through. But these 2 ideas just to kick it off.
Okay, well, I mean, that could take up the whole episode.
I know it could.
But incubating hope, I think that in a world where we have to be realistic about the different obstacles connected with us pursuing whatever our goal is, that it can be very challenging to not be discouraged before we even begin, because we just recognize that the road ahead of us can be very challenging. When we choose first to incubate hope connected with our idea, what we're saying to ourselves is, I'm not expecting for it to be easy. I'm not expecting that it's just going to come without me having to break a sweat or maybe question myself. But what I am saying is that not only am I hopeful about this idea, I'm hopeful about what this idea will translate into for the world. And I think we have to spend just as much time fine-tuning our plans, our strategies, and our ideas as we do the hope connected to it. I don't know if you know people like I do, where they start off the idea and then they get a few no's and now they don't believe in it anymore and they've given up on it altogether. I think a lot of that has to do with the reality that we didn't incubate enough hope to really make sure that the idea withstands some of the struggles that are just guaranteed to come when we're launching something into the world, which I think is a beautiful segue into success being about obedience. If you are in an industry or a field where you are often gauged by your metrics or your outcomes, we can postpone success. We can say it'll be successful when it reaches this specific marker. And then what we learn is that you get to that marker and then they're like, you know what would have really been successful? If it would have done it on the first week, or if it would have done it before you got there. And success is always moving. And so I like to measure the reality that I do have goals that I want to hit with the knowing that I have that me even being in this position, me even having the courage to start it, the courage to step into it is obedience. And success is obedience, that I didn't discredit myself, that I didn't talk myself out of pressing go and pressing play. The fact that I even moved in the direction of where I felt I was being called, of where I felt my gift or talent could take me, was success within itself. It's a success that a lot of people don't get to experience because they are so afraid to move into the direction of what they feel will bring them fulfillment. And so I try to balance the reality that I'm already living further than I could have ever imagined, with also the knowledge that I want to go further.
I love that. You're touching on things that are so important to me because you work with tons of people. I work a lot with entrepreneurs, and I don't know if you see this. I'm sure you do. We're in this culture of we're figuring out which thought leader to listen to and which tactic to apply. But building a business and building anything worth building is so much more than just repeat application of tactics, because our mind gives out so much earlier than when we actually think we've made it. And I feel like this is the biggest piece that's missing in what we see online about what quote unquote success and entrepreneurship is. It is the ability to fall back on your wins and understand when you've won and sort of internalize that and allow that to propel you forward, but also understanding that success is a journey, not a finish line. So we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but let's just briefly touch on the fact that the book you just wrote, Power Moves, I want to understand, out of all the different topics, because I've listened now at this point, before we do this show, I listened to all the podcasts you've been on. I watch a whole bunch of the stuff you put out. So you talk on a lot of different self-development, self-help, mindset, even tactical topics that sort of takes people from where they are to where they want to go. So I always love this. When you put out a book, there's a reason why you put out this particular book on this particular topic out of all the different topics. Why was Power Moves so important to you? What's the concept?
The concept of power moves came to me really as I began to see my life move into this trajectory of partnership with other people. And as I was partnering with other people, whether it was my publisher to write a book or a logistics team for my tours, everyone had their own definition of what success was going to look like. And I started pursuing their definition of success, thinking that once I achieved it, then I would be powerful. Then I would come home and I'd have nothing left to give my family. And I thought, well, this doesn't feel powerful. And I achieved their success, but now I feel empty on the inside. And I really felt like through my own discovery, my own journey and prayer and meditations, that there was this real need for individuals to be able to define what power looks like for themselves before it is hijacked by other people's expectations and other people's definitions. And in going on this journey of trying to define what power looks like for myself, I learned that power was fluid, that what I thought made me powerful as an author was different than what makes me powerful as a mother, and what makes me powerful as a mother, different than what makes me powerful as a partner. And I started realizing that I saw power as a destination, the same way people see success, not recognizing that power really is a flow. And our ability to say, you know what made me powerful here is changing as I'm growing, as I've got more experience. I no longer feel like power has this same definition. And so I wanted to write a book that helped me embrace the fluidity of what power looks like for me as a person who wears many hats, but also was a roadmap for other people to define what power looks like for them as they balance the many hats that they wear. And so I have felt a real sense of liberation in embracing the fluidity of power, even when that means that power for me is rest today. Tomorrow it might be writing a book. The day after that, it may be going on tour. To see each of those things as necessary components of power has allowed me a freedom that I think I was being restricted from when I thought it was just one specific expression.
So I think what you're experiencing is super common and super normal too. Why do people sort of latch on to someone else's definition of power? Like when we go into something, we feel like we got it all figured out. But then, I mean, I'm just speaking from personal experience, I always get rattled, and then all of a sudden I have a peer, a spouse, a mentor, and then I feel myself almost like trying to validate myself and trying to validate what I'm doing the second it doesn't work out 100% with all these external factors. Like what happens? What's happening there? Why do we always fall into this rut? Because you're super powerful. You speak on stage in front of thousands of people. If it can happen to you, if someone's listening, they're like, shit. Well, like she kills it and she still fell into this trap. So how do I avoid it?
Well, I mean, I think we want to do well, and our ideas are really good ideas when they are only within ourselves and maybe the few friendships or relationships that we value. When our ideas have to exist in the larger context of the world, we figure out how much we don't know. And when you start to figure out how much you don't know, it can begin to make you feel inadequate. And when you feel inadequate, it is difficult to be motivated to manifest a vision that you no longer feel has enough support, has enough exposure to be effective in the world. And so we have to really go back to that incubating hope, where we realize that part of the reason why I don't see anyone doing this the way that I feel like it can be done is because I have this unique perspective, this unique offering. And the other thing is that I also need to figure out what failed in the past so that I can sharpen the gift or the idea that I want to bring into the world. And there's a tension that exists within that. There's a losing of yourself and a reclaiming of yourself that must take place in order for you to get to a spot where you really are able to put your roots down. But I think that most people cannot underestimate how much they don't know about the direction they're moving towards, but also how ignorance is not disqualification. It's just an opportunity for you to learn.
You know, when you look at your own journey, you've mentioned before that like all of our past traumas and societal expectations, they don't define us, but ultimately a lot of that does impact us. For everyone going through life day to day, it's hard to just ignore it. And you've even said, like, you have allowed in your past shame to dictate most of your decisions, so why not try faith? Now, this is not a religious podcast by any means, and I want to draw a parallel between your journey and someone out there who's like, okay, great, she found God, she found faith, and that allowed her. But I want you to explain that to somebody who's not religious. I want you to explain to somebody what faith means so that they don't misinterpret it and they don't misunderstand what your message is, because I think it is very important. It doesn't matter if you believe in God or anyways, but you have to believe in something bigger than yourself. But how does somebody who doesn't believe in God to the same degree as you apply that?
That's so part of the reason why I got to that space is that like I had tried everything. So I don't even know that I was like looking for faith as much as I was like, listen, we did this, like why not try? And I will say it wasn't just let me try religion, like let me try to be a good Christian. For me, it was let me tap into this belief that my life is not random, that everyone has an opportunity to add light and value and love into the world, regardless of what they've gone through. It was that belief that I wanted to hang on to, that no matter what I'd gone through in my past, that they could somehow work together and still turn out to good. So I really wanted to hang on to the belief of my faith, not necessarily checking the boxes of religion. And in trying to believe, I mean, it was an attempt. It wasn't something I was sure of. I started asking myself the type of questions like, well, if you believe that your life still has value, if you believe that no matter what you've gone through, you can still add something to this world, what would you provide? What would you offer? And don't compare it to what's already out there. Literally look at your own life, your own resources. What would you say? And for me, it really started off like I would want every teen mom, every girl who's ever done something that made other people frown at her to know that she's still lovable, that she's still allowed to dream, that she still has access to hope, regardless of how much harm she has experienced. That's what I wanted to put into the world. And so I tried it on smaller scales. And then it grew and it got bigger. And the more that I got exposed to more people, the more I wanted to tell them. And I think I'm constantly having to ask myself that question. If you believe that your life is not random, if you believe that you have a limited time to release something that could possibly make someone's life better, what would you want to offer? And I ask myself that question, whether I'm speaking in a room full of thousands or I'm about to have a one-on-one Zoom with someone who just DM'd me randomly. What can I offer in this moment that can make someone's life better? To me, that was stepping into not just having faith, but being a lifeline of faith for another person.
So I love that. And I guess that's ultimately, like, just to summarize what like that power move is, it's a lot of understanding what your own power is and recognizing that.
Yeah. And I will say, recognizing the power of fear and the power of shame and how it can limit us from believing that we have a good power to offer to the world. I think for me, and at least my family, my experiences, my culture, a lot of times fear just becomes normalized and shame just becomes normalized. And the way that our families have always done things becomes so normalized that we don't see them as powerful barriers of entry that keep us from living limitless lives. And when we see that like the power of shame, the power of fear, the power of my past has enough power to keep me from thinking that I've got something to offer to the world, then I don't accurately wage war against those things with a higher belief, with a better thought, with actions that are in direct competition to what those thoughts would have me to believe. And so I do think it is believing that you have a power to offer the world, and also recognizing that there is real resistance to that power being released.
So because I'm sure that a lot of this stuff is just like generational trauma. Like what you're talking about right now is just normalized, just the way it's always been done. It's like, this is how much money my family has always made. That takes a lot to disrupt that cycle. It takes a lot for you to push back. So, okay, let's figure out a playbook for somebody that doesn't matter. It could be somebody whose parents made, 50 grand a year, parents made 200 grand a year. It doesn't really matter. The point is, so you're trying to break you out of this cycle. So generation, kind of this is the status quo. What is the action item, the step that you can take that starts to that flywheel that pushes you in the right direction?
Okay, so I will take it even deeper, because I think that we are experiencing a generational shift in the ways that we engage with technology, in the way that we even engage with business. I think that we're literally watching the world change from the way that things have always been done into a new way of being. I look at this generation of millennials and now Zers that are no longer willing to work the way that some boomers did, where their families were the casualties to pursuing the pension or their retirement, where they really are choosing, I would rather live in a different type of lifestyle and still have my family and values and mental health than pursue this corner office that may result in me not having the family I desire. So I think we're experiencing a shift. I would say to that person who's never seen it done, but feels within themselves that it should change, even if they don't believe that they're the ones that should change it, to begin to think about like, what changes would you implement? Don't get bogged down by the details. Don't get caught in the logistics. Like, let's really dream. What do we want to see it look like? What would we want to see done differently in our family? What type of resources do we want to see available? Because until we can really give that a vision, then we can't really even attract the level of thinking, the level of creativity, the level of innovation required to lay hold of that vision. It's one thing to want things to change. It's another thing to let your mind roam free rather, with the innovation required to make it happen. And so I would say take the limits off of your mind, to take the limits off of those parameters, and to begin dreaming about what you want to see happen. And then what would it take for you to get from where you are to what you see? Once again, don't think about the money that you would need, the time that you need, the people that you would need. Just really begin to lay out this plan, because I think what's going to happen when you begin to lay that plan out is that you will begin to see opportunities differently. You will see how small opportunities can lead to bigger moments. You will begin to hear it echoed in other people's stories. And what you see as a dream will not be as unreachable, because you've got a vision and you begin to see it happen in other people's lives.
I love this. You mentioned a really good point. The way we work, the way we want to work, what we value is changing. Do you see issue with that? Do you think that maybe, so two ends of the spectrum, the traditional way it's always been done, maybe that creates more wealth immediately? I don't know. It doesn't always have to if you find a way to architect wealth in different ways. But maybe it creates more wealth, it gives you more options. And maybe if you are able to think differently and you have a great 9 to 5, it allows you the stability to build a business that can really take it to the next level. On the other end of the spectrum, you have somebody who is not wanting to work in an office, is wanting to travel, is wanting to do maybe a more like nomad lifestyle, and maybe that allows for more creativity to think differently and to approach life differently. So I'm curious, when you speak to so many people and people come to you for advice, is the advice to pursue something that feels good and is more in vogue, or is it to push back and to do the hard work and to sort of put in the reps so that you're used to the work required to take yourself to the next level? Like, when you talk to young people, which way do you point them?
Well, you asked me, do I think there's something wrong? I think results may vary. You know how at the end of
Yeah.
those prescription drug commercials, they're like, results may vary.
with like the 20,000 side effects and a whole bunch of different out. Yeah.
I don't think we're going to know how well this path turns out for anyone for probably 30, 40, 50 years when they're towards the end of their lives saying what they wish they would have done differently or what they feel they've done well. I think that my goal is to help people lay hold of a vision of their spiritual, mental, emotional, financial health that is a reflection of what feels authentic for themselves. I don't know that my goal is to point them in any specific direction as much as it is to create a space where they have time to be authentic, where they're no longer living under other people's pressures, other people's experiences, so that they can determine what authenticity looks like for them, so that they can create a plan that allows them to define what success looks like for themselves, so that no matter what happens, 40, 50 years down the road, maybe they have generational wealth has gone to another level, or maybe they have generational health and emotional wellness that happen in a way that they'd never seen before, that they will be able to say, I lived according to the truth of my values. And sometimes I had to stretch, and sometimes I had to disappoint some people, and sometimes I had to remodify those plans, but I lived according to my conviction. And so if I can get people to a space of authenticity, I think that conviction can tell them what path to take.
When you mentioned that you sort of help people across financial, mental, spiritual, and even physical to a degree. I'm curious if you see one of those buckets hurting people the most, say in 2024, like which one of those buckets is not full?
Oh, it depends a lot. I mean, I am speaking to primarily people of color who have had disproportionate experiences in professionalism and financial spaces. And so I think that most of the time when I speak to them, they're reeling from the effects of feeling disqualified from roles before they even get into them. But then when I speak to other spaces where maybe they aren't primarily people of color, but I marvel at what they have gone through and the buckets that they see as empty. I think if there is anything that I feel remedies all of it, no matter which bucket is empty, I think that from a place of emotional and spiritual wellness and fullness, that we're able to better show up in those empty spaces and to get them filled in ways that are healthy for ourselves, which is why I think if I had to choose any bucket to pour into, I would love to pour into all of them. But absolutely, that if I can get your core well, that can overflow into those other spaces.
There's a quote that I love that sort of speaks into stepping into your power. The quote is, it is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And that's Marianne Williamson. And I'm curious if you know the reason why we understand that there's all these things that stop us from believing in ourselves, and there's all these generationals and traumas and shame and doubt. But say we listen to this podcast. People listen to this podcast and they're going to say, yeah, I get it. Like, I get it. And then fast forward a year, they're still not going to do anything. Like, they're just not going to do shit. They're not going to try and fix anything, even though they know that there's a problem, even though they know that they're not being their best self or putting their best self towards their work or their family or the world. Why are we so scared of succeeding?
My hypothesis is that we are afraid of success because we are not sure if we can sustain it. I think that if we could do it once, that would be something, but it would be disappointing to hit it once and never be able to do it again. So it's easier to not go for it at all. What if I can't sustain it? Like, what if I can start? And I see this in relationships too. Like, what if I can get the relationship, but then I'm not a good partner and I'm too selfish, I'm this. And I think the idea of sustaining what we start keeps us from initiating it to begin with. I would say to that person that with each attempt, we become better at sustainability, that we learn what tires us out, we learn how to communicate better, we learn what plans we need to have in place. I would think less about sustaining where we start and more about learning each step of the way. Because if we learn each step of the way, then the goal is not sustainability, it's just another lesson. And I think success is how many lessons we can pile onto this journey that make us better for the next step.
You know, there's so many, so you mentioned that you see this a lot with the relationships, and I actually love relationships and looking at relationships and unpacking relationships, because I think there's actually a lot of little micro tests you can do in a relationship that can translate into your career and your business. Like, I was on a podcast this morning, I was talking to somebody about radical candor and what was important for me in a partner, and the ability to be open and communicate was so important. But it's so obvious that translates into business and the building teams and whatnot. So when you think about giving people micro wins, and maybe you could talk about your own experience, because I want you to feel comfortable talking about whatever you feel comfortable talking about with your own relationship in your own house. But what were things that you did maybe in your own relationship that proved that you could own your power in your relationship, better your relationship, that you could now sort of replicate out in the world and business and some of the lessons you teach? Because I think that, like, listen, business is not forgiving. Relationships are also not that forgiving sometimes, but I mean, at least we get a shot, like right after this, I can go test something out and see if I'm being a better person, a better boyfriend, husband, partner in the next 5 minutes, where sometimes in business, you can only see it over a period of time.
It's so funny you say that, because my husband has a business philosophy where he's like, I will never get in partnership with someone who cheats on their wife. Because he's like, if you cannot maintain your promise and covenant to this person, I don't stand a chance. So I do think there is a lot of connection between the ways that we show up in relationship. I will say that my husband's probably similar to you in that he really likes radical candor. Like, he's like, just give it to me straight, no matter what it is. Just tell it to me. I think within myself. I process my thoughts internally. When I'm ready to talk about it, I will share it. And I think for a lot of the beginning part of our marriage, it made my husband kind of like constantly pull at me to try and figure out what it was that I was trying or not saying. I think that really helped me in business, though, because he forced me to stand by in us communicating. He forced me to really open up about what I was feeling, how my perspective may have been different from his, and to really stand by my perspective in a way that forced him to see things my way. And I think that this has been helpful for me in business, because I've done a lot of conversing with people who had more experience and more knowledge in a certain field than I do. But I know my audience, and I know that my idea has merit and value. And sometimes I don't always feel like I am communicating those ideas in a way that they can understand. And in those moments, it can be easy for me to abandon my idea and just go with the flow, or to back down altogether. But because I had this beautiful space to kind of sharpen my communication skills, I've been willing to, stand 10 toes down on some ideas that I think have ultimately been very helpful once I was able to get my partner to understand the value of the audience or the idea that I was bringing to the table. But I had to learn to really speak up in that way through my husband's communication preferences.
I just want to take a second and thank the HubSpot Podcast Network for sponsoring the show's success story. We've been part of their network for the past 3 years now. If you're a podcast fan, you have to check out some of the other incredible podcasts in the HubSpot Podcast Network, like My First Million, hosted by Sam Parr and Sean Puri. They feature famous guests like Alex Hormozi, Sophia Amoruso, Hassan Minhaj, sharing their secrets on how they made their first million and how to apply their learnings to capitalize on today's business trends and opportunities. Listen to My First Million wherever you get your podcasts. I love that, though, because in this little like microcosm example, petri dish of testing stuff out, you learn how to own your power, but you also understand power dynamics. And maybe just help me understand, or teach me, but also teach the audience too. When you own your power, it does not mean asserting absolute power over other people. That is not owning your power. And I think that is very important, because I don't want somebody to listen to this and then try and own their power and turn into an asshole. And that's not good.
And don't send us any letters. We did not boost anybody up into doing that.
Yeah. So owning your power, I think you have to start to understand, if you own your power, like you mentioned with your husband, and when you get into business conversations, is very different than asserting dominance in every situation. So step 2, after owning your power, talk about power dynamics. Talk about understanding how to engage throughout your day, throughout life, throughout business.
Okay, I will give you a great example because my husband and I, we moved to Dallas. My father has been leading this community and organization for over 20 plus years, but he's at a season where he's considering what transition and succession looks like for him. And so we're blending ideas. We've got two different perspectives from two different generations, two different definitions of what success looks like and definitions of what power looks like. And so I will tell you that I believe in the power of what I bring to the table. I believe that I understand what's important to this generation. I believe that I understand what detracts them from coming into rooms and what attracts them. When you are owning your power in a space where you are navigating power dynamics, you have to understand the power that the other person brings to the table. Not just that they are a decision maker, but maybe they have proven experience in a field that they don't even understand is changing yet. Because I think we see this a lot in generational shifts where they don't even realize that, like, people aren't doing that anymore. People don't talk that way anymore. People don't navigate rooms in this way anymore. And so they're married to a concept that once had power that doesn't have power anymore. If you are going to blend power dynamics, you have to honor the power that the other person possesses. And by honoring it, it means that you can't come in there and just be like, this is dumb, this is nobody does, it's old, it's antiquated, because you have robbed yourself of an alliance you need in order to successfully transition from one way of doing things to another way of doing things, or a blended way of doing things. When you say something negative about a person's expression or a way that things have been done, you automatically lose out on an ally that you need. So in navigating power dynamics, you have to honor the power that the other person possesses so that they are more willing to incorporate your perspective, your views into how things can become better. When I see younger generations working with older generations, I know that they're very zealous and they want to get their ideas out and they want to tell them all of the ways that they can change things. But I think that they end up doing that at the detriment of making the other person feel old, antiquated, and no longer useful, and that shuts them down. And so in order to really build a bridge that is worthy of two generations crossing, you have to honor what the other person brings to the table. And I think that's in a relationship and in business, because my husband, he's more of a macro thinker. I'm more of a micro thinker. And so I need his macro perspective of things, but he needs me to be micro because I'm going to execute it and get it done. And so we have to honor the power that the other person possesses.
That's amazing. When you go into a relationship or a business engagement, because with your husband, you know how he works and you know what he brings to the table. When you're going into a conversation with somebody new and you're doing a negotiation or you're trying to figure out how to do a deal together, how do you, going to that discussion, figure out how that person operates quickly so that you can figure out whether or not you should bring more or sort of take a step back?
I'm constantly asking questions. When we walk into potential business partnerships, I think that we often oversell ourselves and we don't hear enough from the other person. And if you're not sure about what you bring to the table, you can oversell yourself trying to prove that you deserve to be in the room and then miss out on the opportunity to fully understand who it is that you're sitting across from. And so generally when we're talking about partnership, it's because we have something that the other person could benefit from and they have something that we could benefit from. And so understanding how they have been able to provide value to previous clients or partners, to understand just to the extent that they're able to share what it is that they feel like they can offer to you, to ask them questions about where do you feel like you have an opportunity for growth within your organization? What does dreaming look like for you? What does success look like for you? Because I need to understand whether or not this is a temporary partnership or something that has potential for longevity. And that helps me when I understand what their ultimate goals are, understanding what their turnover is, what type of organization is this, because I hate doing business with the deal maker. And then when it's time for me to actually work with the people who are going to execute, those people are constantly turning over. And so who would directly be dealing with my account? I mean, there are all kinds of questions to understand what power they bring to the table and whether or not it's going to be valuable for you and for how long it will be valuable to you.
So you've mentioned 3 questions that you should ask a partner before you get into a marriage with them or an engagement. You mentioned, what is your shared experience? I'm telling you in case you don't remember when you put these out into the world. No, I got you. I'm not that bad. I'm not gonna make you remember every interview you've ever done. But you suggested what are your shared expressions of faith? What is the most traumatic experience you've had in your life, and how does that basically show up in your present, and what brings you joy? And you mentioned these three questions before you engage with a partner. I was curious, do you have questions, and you can just think of them on the fly, just meaningful questions that you think you'd ask somebody before you get into a business relationship with them?
Okay, so you're putting me on the spot. So,
I know.
okay, so I would say, what made you start? Because I want to
I
hear
like
the
that.
passion and purpose behind how you got to wherever you are. I want to hear about a time where you almost quit. Because if you're in business and you haven't almost quit,
Yeah, you're full of it.
because don't lie to me. Like, maybe you didn't pull the plug, maybe you didn't fire anybody, but tell me about a time where you thought to yourself, I almost quit. And maybe what kept you going.
I like that. Those are good because those are see. Listen, you'd be a good podcaster. You have these like beautiful open-ended questions. No, they're very good. They're very good because then you start to see the real person. Which at the end of the day, I mean, business is just human to human, and I think people forget that too. Like you're just doing business with other people. Everything is so transactional, and then I think COVID and Zoom probably didn't help. But it's all human to human. At the end of the day, um, talk to me about. So you built out Women Evolve. So we're talking about concepts and ideas that can help anybody. But talk to me about the movement behind Women Evolve. What is the unique value that Women Evolve brings to the table? What is the unique problem you're trying to solve for? Because you mentioned you talk to a whole bunch of different groups. You talk to people of color, underrepresented minorities. You speak to people, just the world at large. Obviously, Women Evolve is focused on women. So what's the problem?
Okay, so Woman Evolve is solving a problem for people who wanted to, women in general, who wanted to believe in something bigger than themselves, but also did not want to lose themselves in the process of it. So I grew up in church and I was a teen mother. And so I grew up in church, but I really didn't feel like it was a part of my life. It wasn't something that I could really plug into. And then I also grew up on 90s hip hop and rap. And I'm just like, I don't think that the two could ever meet. And when I started Woman Evolve, I was, sharing my story, but I also wanted to create an environment where someone felt safe enough to bring all of themselves into a room where they could connect with like-minded people and have an encounter that was intentional and spiritual, but also practical in helping them to navigate health and wellness and pursuing their dreams and their goals, and to leave with tools and resources. And so it started off, I was thinking about it just as an event where I wanted to create an environment where these women felt safe enough. A lot of times for women's events, we have events for corporate women. We have events for entrepreneurs or just spiritual events. And I'm like, how do we create a space that incorporates all of who a woman is so she can bring all of herself into a space? From there, it kind of offshot. We've got a podcast, a subscription on demand channel. We've got a really intentional social media following and devotional and courses, because what I learned is that though the events were great, that they really wanted to figure out, how do I walk this out day to day? And so our job then began to create content and connection points that allowed for them to continue what happened in that room and incorporate it into their day-to-day lives. And so from that space, we've gotten an opportunity to be really creative about understanding market needs and creating the type of content that is accessible and also robust enough to fulfill them in the areas where they felt they had lack.
I'm curious why you mentioned this, and it's interesting. Why, when women, I don't know, try and build or upskill or take themselves to the next level, why did you say that sometimes women lose themselves?
Oh, man. First of all, a woman who has decided to scale in any way outside of what society accepts is really being rebellious in a way that I think we underestimate. We're rebelling against status quo. We're rebelling against norms. Sometimes we're rebelling against what's acceptable within our culture. And I don't think we realize when we begin to pursue whatever scaling looks like for us, just how difficult it's going to be to establish ourselves outside of what has been accepted. And I think in the process of trying to establish ourselves that I'm an analogy person. So if
Yeah.
you can imagine someone like breaking outside of their norm, leaving their comfort zone, maybe they get a tent, maybe they get an apartment. It takes a minute before you decide where you're going to build a house. And I think that a lot of people get lost in between the breakout and the establishing. And it takes a person of real humility and commitment to keep going, even in the midst of that discouragement. And so I think Woman Evolve and others like it, there's so many incredible brands that dedicate themselves to meeting people in that middle ground, are meant to help you keep going so you don't snap back into what was comfortable but maybe not constructive.
And then, so outside of like the resources and the community, which I think is huge, because having people around you that are on the same path is life changing. I mean, we don't have to accomplish it on our own. It's really difficult, and I think a lot of people get in their own head and self-sabotage. But outside of community, resources, courses, all the you just listed like 10 different things. If you were going to give one piece of advice to a woman, and I need it to come from you because this is not the perspective that I will ever have. So I want to upskill myself. I want to take myself to the next level. I don't want to lose myself. I don't want people to look at me like I'm pushing too hard or whatever the stigma is that I'm scared of. There's probably 1,000,001 stigmas that I'm scared of. Everyone has stigmas that they're scared of. So how do I make sure that I don't lose what's the main takeaway, the main idea, so I don't lose myself on this journey I'm going on? You can even say it for you, like when you moved away from, like, first of all, like 90s hip hop, nothing wrong. You picked Biggie, Pac, listen, the last album that I liked was like the Future Drake album, and then like in my opinion, rap went downhill after that. But like,
What is happening?
I don't know.
Like, I feel like the old person. I want to keep up,
Yeah.
but I can't. What are we doing? No, I get it.
I can't keep up. So yeah, so like 90s hip hop, no problem with that. But you still want your identity, right? You still want your identity, and you care as anyone does how you're perceived. So as you upskill, as you build shit, as you conquer life for yourself, how did you not lose yourself? What was, and it doesn't have, there's no right or wrong answer. It could be God, it could be faith, it could be family, it could be, it could be going outside of the city and going camping or going to see family like once a year because that grounds you and it brings you back to reality, whatever it is. I'm just curious what has worked for you.
I will say that pursuing success without a love of self will always be very dangerous because it will be very difficult to separate your outcomes from your identity. And that means that even the great outcomes you're going to think represent who you are, and the negative ones represent who you are. I will say that before you attempt to scale yourself, that you've got to find a way to really love yourself with no additions, with no scaling, to really love yourself. And for me, my faith is a part of that. But also, when you love yourself, you know how to feed yourself. You know what makes you feel whole, what makes you feel complete. Like, I do need to go camping. I need to be on my own. Like, you got to love the way that you're showing up in the world and what feeds you. And that's what we're holding on to. We're holding on to that home, that sense of home that exists within yourself, so that no matter how successful or how terrible the outcomes are, you know how to draw a sword between what I did and who I am. And I think from that space, you're able to protect yourself. And as you invite different people to be on the journey of loving you, of helping you, of partnering with you on a core level, like intimate relationships and friendships, you got to trust that they love what you love about you too, because part of being in relationship with someone is signing up to help them protect their core from a world that often tries to deplete us.
I wonder when you speak to people, do you feel like they try and scale to get fulfillment and try and build to get fulfillment as opposed to finding that first in themselves? Like, is entrepreneurship almost like an escape mechanism?
Well, for sure. I'm careful to call it an escape mechanism I think that it's what the world applauds. I mean, we have so many people online telling you like, hey, you got to have a bit. If you don't have this, you're not that. If you're not this, you're not that. And I think entrepreneurship becomes like that carrot dangling in front of us, or success in general becomes the carrot dangling in front of us. But no one is asking the question, like, what does success look like for you? Because you are going to be chasing yourself, burning out over someone else's definition of success. And so I do think that we get caught up trying to achieve a world that, some other influencer or content creator told us would make us happy, only to find out that it didn't make us happy. Maybe it worked for them, but it didn't work for us. And so I do think that if we are not really finding a way to embrace who we are, that we're going to embrace who someone else thinks we should be.
Yeah, and this is bringing it full circle now. If somebody, I know you've kind of touched on this, but I just want to sort of highlight this one more time. If somebody is trying to figure out what their North Star is and trying to figure out what their version of success is, how do they find that? Because that self-awareness is probably what leads to all the positive outcome and all the things that we're talking about right now. But you have to know where you're heading.
Yeah, I will say that I think the ultimate success that any human can experience is to leave each person, each opportunity better than they were before they had an encounter with them. And to dare to ask the question, how can I make my corner of the world better than it was after I'm gone? And to take advantage of any opportunity or resource that would allow your better to become great. A lot of times people become incredibly successful entrepreneurs so that their profit can serve underserved communities. So entrepreneurship is not bad. Like, the idea of profitability and success is necessary to help many people. But I think that if you stop at just profitability because you just want to be rich, I think that you've missed out on a unique opportunity to say, and what can I do with my wealth that makes the world a better place? Because money itself, it feels nice to have options. It feels nice to live better. But then there comes a point where you realize that even that is going to pass away, and that I want to leave something in the earth that leaves this world better. And so I say, start with being better, start with doing better, start with making others better, and then see where that takes you.
When we talk about entrepreneurship, a lot of people speak about mentors all the time, and they speak about different kinds of mentors and how to find mentors and whatnot, and that's great. We don't have to go into that because that's been done to death. So the thing that I actually appreciate with you is you actually speak about different ecosystems besides mentors. You speak about family, you speak about community. It could be like people on your block, or it could be people in like an actual religious community. There's different types of communities. You speak about work, and you speak about power dynamics, power dynamics are interesting, but I'm also more curious about, as you grow and you succeed, what is the relationship like with all these different groups outside of mentors? Mentors, people get it. You need mentors. It helps you with figuring out shit, and you don't have to figure out and reinvent the wheel. But all these different groups that are part of your life, I think people struggle, myself included, understanding what place they fit in this nonstop work, trying to build the next thing, trying to hustle all the time environment, because these people were part of your life at one point, friend groups, family for sure. And sometimes they don't understand, or they don't fit into this nice, defined, cookie cutter version of entrepreneurship. So what are these groups to you? I mean, outside of the fact that you work with your family, but for somebody maybe who doesn't.
I've had to, and I just recently started working with my family, but I think I've had to communicate to my ecosystems how I am changing. And so with any ecosystem, one role changing disrupts the rest of the ecosystem. And disruption is not necessarily bad. It just means that things are moving differently. And I think a lot of times we don't allow that ecosystem to be disrupted. We either stay away from it, or we try to fit into this version of ourselves that they used to know so that we don't dysregulate anything. But communication is the way that we introduce the disruption while also maintaining this place that we want that ecosystem to still exist in. And so I would say, where do you want these people to fit? Where do you want your family to fit? Where do you want your friends to fit? and what's keeping them from fitting in that space. If you are at a space where, like, I just released this book, I was gone 3 to 4 weeks, I'm doing interviews all of the time, I'm not the same friend that they were used to connecting to. But I told them that, like, hey, I'm going through a season right now where it's taking everything I have and even that which I don't have to launch this book. And so I'm sorry I haven't responded to your messages, but this is where I am. So I just didn't allow the ecosystem to be disrupted without there being communication. There are some people who are like, no, I totally get it. I'm still going to text you all of the time and check on you can respond or not respond. There are some people who are like, you know what? If you can't be consistent, I'm going to pull back and have my own space. Like, giving them permission to respond however they need to respond is important. But I think you have an opportunity to figure out where you want them to fit and then communicating how you're changing so that they are able to understand what they can expect from you. I will say this and then I'll be quiet. I think that one of the greatest mistakes that we make.
You don't have to be quiet on a podcast. It's fine.
I just feel like I've been talking a lot. But I think one of the greatest mistakes we make when we are scaling in any way, whether it's our personal development or professional development, is that we expect for people to automatically expand at the rate of our scaling. And some people have the capacity to expand, but we don't tell them how we need them to expand. And so we end up resenting people for not making space for us, but we didn't even tell them they were growing. And it was important to me that I wrote a book that wasn't like, if they don't get it, burn the bridge. Because like that's great for an Instagram clip. Like, if they can't go with you to the next level, then leave them there. Like, girl, this is my mother, okay? Like, I don't want to leave her there.
Yeah, Instagram's a little wild sometimes with the advice that you get, but
yes, but I think communication is everything, and I just wouldn't underestimate their ability to grow with you.
Yeah. How has it worked? Like, this strategy in your life? I mean, it's not always perfect. How has it worked for you?
I deal with my children. I deal with my husband. Usually my stuff is seasonal. So I know that it's going to take me about 6 to 8 weeks to really launch this book in a way that's going to change the way that we connect. But then I'm going to take summer down with my kids and we're going to go on a Disney cruise and I'm going to let them drive me crazy. Like, I'm going to swing the pendulum in the other direction. I do think it is unfair to just constantly ask for someone to sacrifice without being willing to give something in return. And I think that when I ask them to sacrifice while also knowing how I'm going to give in return, that it is easier for them to make room for me.
I love this. Okay. I want to bring 2 more ideas out of the book, and then we'll do a couple last questions to wrap this up. First question, what has been one lesson that is from the book that we didn't talk about that you think is really, really important?
Well, each chapter ends with this 3-pronged call to action, and it's marinate, activate, pray. And so marinating is like, if you have this new idea, this new way of thinking, this new way of being that you want to introduce into your life, like, try to avoid just closing the book and activating it immediately. Like, take a minute and let it marinate. How is this going to change your life? How is it going to change your patterns and routines? Who's going to be most affected by it? So let's let it marinate. And then once it's marinated and you kind of size it up, here's one way that you can begin to activate it. And then prayer is such an important part to me because of my faith. And for someone else, it may just be meditating and sitting in stillness. But that is when I get to like reconcile the cost of this activation, the grief connected with me changing, the way it's disrupted my world and how that's hard, even though it's necessary. And the help and support and guidance I need in moving forward is what I get through prayer. So I think that's really important. Marinate, activate, pray.
I love it. What is one thing? I mean, the book's very recent, so obviously not much has changed. But I will ask you anyways, what is one thing that today you wish, just thinking back, you're like, I wish I included this in the book and I didn't put it in for whatever reason? Maybe the editors, maybe it was too long. Maybe it was something that happened to me in the past week and a half. What's one thing that you're like, damn it, that really should have been part of this? And will probably be the next book, but that's for the future.
I wish that I would have created, I used a dictionary definition of power because I wanted it to be fluid enough to meet different situations, but I wish I would have come up with my own definition of power.
Do you have one?
Ugh. A little bit.
Okay, what's the raw version with the caveat that this is not prepped?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Don't hold me to it. But I would consider power authenticity, resiliency, joy, determination, and humility combined in this like potent cocktail of who you are. I think all of those things combined and learning to navigate them and trust them and allow them to show up in every space of your life is power.
I like that definition. I like that definition a lot. You should run. Yeah. Well, then run with it. Listen. So this obviously books are not easy things to do. Like they're a lot of work. But next one, you got it. You got a new definite power 2.0, whatever. We'll figure it out. Where do you want to send people? Obviously, so Amazon, anywhere you get your books, you can go buy Power Moves now. Is there anywhere else that you want to send people? Social, website, anything like that?
And I'm on the socials I'm probably most active on Instagram, Sarah Jakes Roberts. But yeah, if they get the book, I pray that that'll be enough to help them know everything they need to know about me.
Perfect. Okay. And then the last thing, I just always like this. You've lived a good life through many seasons. Looking back now, what would be one lesson you would tell your 20-year-old self?
I would tell my 20-year-old self to dare to be present in my body and in my life. In my 20s, I was so busy. As a teen mom, I was so busy trying to beat the statistics, beat the odds, prove everyone wrong that I was all mind, all mental. And I think that I would encourage myself to be present in my body and to really trust my gut and my core and my instincts in a way that I don't think my mind could have ever given me the wisdom that my core was trying to give me.